A very common question I hear from couples is, my spouse and I keep arguing about the same things over and over again. So how do we break this impasse? I want to share with you some principles that work, but I also want you to keep in mind that your focus should be on your part of the conflict, because you only have control over your part. And by the way, the principles I share with you today, they're also relevant for your other relationships, whether with your kids, other family members, or your friends. So first of all, many times our arguments revolve around the fact that we just have different temperaments from our spouses and we see things differently. We also come from very different family backgrounds. Through our experiences growing up, we learn how to deal with conflict, how to handle our emotions, how to show love, and so on. So it's important that you understand and accept, and even see the positives in your differences based on your gender, your temperament, family background, and also lifestyle preferences. Unfortunately, all too often, couples actually interpret these differences as attacks, or even as moral issues or issues of inadequacy. These differences can boil down to, if you really loved me and understood me, you wouldn't do it that way. That is setting up your spouse for failure big time, and it's also setting you up for ongoing unhappiness with your spouse. Now, another key contribution to recurring conflicts in a relationship is the way we tend to confuse our motivations with our actions. Now, my motivations for what I say or do to my spouse may be good, but my behavior may end up to be hurtful to him. So when he confronts me, I can be bewildered since I'm looking at the conflict from my point of view of my motivation, which is good because I really want to help him. But he's looking at it from the point of view of my behavior, which he didn't like. So no matter how good my intentions are, hurtful words and behavior are hurtful. Now, let me share with you another reason why couples get caught into this conflict dance. Do you know that the majority of conflicts with spouses have very little to do with the actual content of their argument? It actually has more to do with the underlying emotions and hurt, what I call the dance. Now, I do or say something that triggers an emotional reaction in my spouse, which in turn causes him to say or do something that triggers a reaction in me, which causes me to do or say something, and on and on. So here's a common dance for a lot of couples. The husband's busy at work, and so he's become more distant than usual. The wife's being a little neglected, which triggers her feelings of abandonment. So she approaches him and she uses her words to tell him how she feels in an attempt to try to gain closeness with him. He interprets her words as criticism, which triggers his feelings of insecurity and a fear of failure. He then responds by further withdrawing from her, which triggers her feelings of abandonment even more, which causes her to be anxious, so she ups the ante because obviously he doesn't understand how she hurt him, how hurt she is. And she begins to shower him with a flurry of more words that have escalated emotional tension, which causes him to shut down even more, which causes her to pursue him even more until he finally explodes. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Now, the interesting thing about relationships is that we interpret what happens and how others respond to us by our early childhood experiences and the conclusions we made based on those experiences. So, for example, if we've experienced emotional abandonment or rejection repeatedly as a child, we're going to interpret our spouse's actions and words through that filter, and we're going to respond accordingly. It's very common when we encounter difficulties in a relationship get angry and to blame their failure to love us as we need to be loved. It's true, they likely played a role in our relationship dysfunction, but more importantly, our difficulties are often shaped by our responses based on our own internal triggers. Now, the good news about this is that we have control over this and we can make healthy changes, whereas we can't make others love us more or better. So it's important to understand the underlying hurt and pain that's underneath our protective anger. The next time you're caught in the same old cycle of argument with your spouse, stop and think about what your underlying feelings of hurt are. Think about what his or her underlying feelings of hurt might be, and then begin to dialogue at that honest level. I'm Dr. Merry.